Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, November 14th, 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And social commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
I noted, and Christine noted a third, that the two leading newspapers of the liberal media, the New York Times and the Washington Post, have eerily similar stories leading their homepages today. The New York Times story is America First. Some Trump supporters worry that's no longer the case. President Trump has been dining with billionaires and taken an interest in crises abroad, leading to fears that he is drifting from his more populist stances. And the Washington Post's headline is, Trump faces heat from MAGA base on America First agenda, Epstein. Its leaders erupted over his assertion that the U.S. needs foreign workers because it does not have enough talented people. That rift, among other issues, has raised some GOP concern about enthusiasm ahead of the 2026 midterms. What is of interest to me when you have something like this happening where two leading journalistic institutions come up with a non-news story and they come up with it on the same day. Christine, you saw a third at The Atlantic, which isn't a newspaper, but yours is, just to add in the piece of data.
It's Mark Leibovich, and here's the little interesting quote. He says, voters keep identifying the high cost of living as their chief concern. Trump, meanwhile, has displayed a Marie Antoinette-like indifference to the economic struggles many Americans are mentioning. He's devoted time to overseeing the construction of a new patio and ballroom in the White House, hosting a Great Gatsby-themed party at Mar-a-Lago, and reportedly trying to have the future home stadium of the Washington Commanders named after him.
Well, that is, he was probably listening to you on the Trump refusal to engage with the affordability crisis. But I think when this happens, you have to ask, what is it that is going on in the liberal mindset that leads to these stories that are, well, over here on the planet Pluto, where the people who vote in horrible ways live, they're really getting angry at each other. Ooh, this could be fun and good for us, that they're all getting angry at each other. So is this an accurate depiction of a crisis on the right? Or is it rather that the fact that Trump is saying certain types of things that you might actually expect the liberal media to grant him strange new respect on, like, we need highly skilled foreign workers, that's good for America, I never said otherwise. Those are H-1B visas, not, people coming across the border illegally, but sort of high skilled people that we can essentially bring in from other countries to add to our own storehouse of knowledge and to produce high-end, innovations and scientific change and all of that. You would think they would say, well, even Trump knows that that's a good idea, or even Trump knows that maybe even Trump is learning that maybe the tariffs aren't the greatest economic issue. But that's not where they're going. They're going with, oh, poor MAGA. They're getting really angry at Trump. And I don't think that's true. I mean, I'm not like on a conference call with MAGA where they are, getting all upset about everything. Seems
You're not
to me
included
like
on that call. It's a great call every morning.
Yeah,
John.
no, they don't. I'm not on that call. I wasn't invited to the Gatsby party either, so I am really on the outs here. I still think that the idea that there is any substantive difference whatsoever between MAGA as a thing and Trump as its representation is non-existent. There is no gap. Trump is MAGA. MAGA is the act of supporting Trump personally. We've spent now almost a decade trying to come up with a defensible or definable philosophy that undergirds Trump's actions, and we have been defeated in doing so because there is no such definable uh, strategy, policy, or set of ideas that can be added up into a into a political philosophy. And my guess is, if you ask Republicans right now, 90% of them would say they support Trump, or 95% of them would say they support Trump.
The part of the story that rings true, though, is that the Republicans who aren't super MAGA, they're not they don't buy in necessarily to the cult of personality, Trump can do no wrong, but they're generally willing and were willing to give him another chance, and they trust a lot of the policy changes he's made. They voted him in to make those policies, particularly the border and the anti-woke stuff. But they are, I would call them restive, not angry. They are worried about prices. And one thing that didn't get reported in a lot of these stories is that obviously Trump is taking that on board. He met with a bunch of CEOs the other night and kind of asked them for ideas. I mean, he's doing what presidents should do when the economy isn't going the way they want to, and they're searching for a message that will reassure their voters. So he's kind of being very traditional president in that sense. But you do hear from people who consider themselves members of the Republican coalition that they are very concerned about the policies that he's enacted, the tariffs most importantly. And so him rolling back the stuff on coffee and prices on those sorts of things, that's for those people.
But that is not what these stories are intending. These stories are intending to suggest that there is a division between Trump and MAGA, not mainstream Republicans who never like tariffs and stuff like that.
But see, I mean, look, I agree with you that the definition, essentially, of MAGA is that you support what Trump does. I agree with you. At the same time, I think there has always been some daylight between Trump and his most ardent supporters. It happens not to matter to them, I think, but he was proud of the COVID vaccine long after they were done with it. He turned essentially on them on Ukraine. He's not unwilling to go against his base, but it's not as if they're then jettisoning the movement. So I agree that MAGA is to support Trump, and to support Trump, you don't necessarily have to support Trump.
I think, Seth, that's a very good way to put it. That if you're assuming somehow that what is going to happen to Trump, that there are signs and portents of what's going to happen to Trump in his second term, is, say, what happened to George W. Bush, who was wildly popular with Republicans in his second term, when when Iraq went south and when Hurricane Katrina, destroyed a third of New Orleans and had such a devastating effect on the area around the Gulf of Mexico. And then he also proposed a sort of an immigration bill that was offensive to the hardware. All those things together meant that the Republican Party or the right split started really fraying around now in the year 2005, ahead of a calamitous midterm, and Bush's reputation and standing on the right continued to decline to the point that when he left office, he had an approval rating below 30%. And that wasn't because Democrats hated him, because Democrats always hated him. It was that Republicans turned on him. And I just don't know that that is going to happen in this case. Trump has never asked for anything of his followers other than fealty to him personally. So I guess they can pick and choose. They don't like tariffs. They don't like that he hasn't cut Ukraine off. Some of them don't like the policy toward Israel. Some of them don't wanted a full investigation into Epstein. Some of them want this. But in the end, all he wants is them not to oppose him and for them to like him. And they seem to be perfectly willing to do that if the
I think so, but I
broader.
also think
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
there's, these like the stories are, not to, not to make like a Trumpian fake news type of defensive response on behalf of the president, but like, all right, so what's in the New York Times story is Tom Massey, who Trump is helping to support a primary against, Steve Bannon, who was kicked out of the White House 1,000 years ago, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I'm not even sure that the story says what it says it says. I think that there is rumbling on the MAGA right about foreign entanglements. There is, but none of it's in the New York Times story. Like the Times doesn't have its finger on the pulse. It's asking elected officials who have been in public fights with Trump. Now, maybe Tom Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene are being totally sincere in their specific complaints about affordability. But Tom Massey is quoted in the piece as saying that Trump is too busy protecting pedophiles. So is that what MAGA thinks? I don't think so. Is that the main critique? Is that what are those the words of somebody who sounds like they're really worried about the price of corn, or is that somebody who's involved right now in a kind of a dirt throwing primary contest against somebody who's trying to get him out of the Senate, out of the House,
At
sorry.
the House, right? I think that's a very good point. I mean, yeah, if what you surface are, a failed has been Trumpian has been who in Bannon who claims to sort of be defining the outer reaches of Trumpian support and saying Trump's really, blowing it or something like that with his audience. And then, of course, we know like Nick Fuentes and the world of the ultra extreme podcast right has already turned on Trump. I mean, it turned on Trump a year ago and thinks that he's a wuss and a wimp and he's somehow an Israeli agent or some version of that. But does that define a breach in the movement, or is it just useful? They are being useful idiots for the New York Times left. They are the
The
things
second
that they're
thing.
saying they get attention for.
It's the second thing. Because
Yeah,
well, they're heat-seeking attention missiles. I mean, attention-seeking missiles. And so, imagine Marjorie Taylor Greene's delight when the New York Times is consulting her on the fate of on the fate of the right. I mean, but that's why they do seek out those extremist views. And I think it speaks to what you were saying earlier, John, which is there isn't ever going to be daylight between Trump and MAGA, but the left, and particularly the media left, have never really understood or been willing to accept why he's so appealing to such a broad range of voters. And even when he makes terrible mistakes, even though his character is obviously morally compromised at many levels, they still keep coming back for more. And that, I think it's that conundrum that these stories continue to reflect, even after more than a decade of reporting on Trump. They're still mildly baffled. Like, why? What is it about this guy? Because they have not yet found that guy for themselves on the left.
yeah.
I mean, look,
He
I pointed this out a while ago, but I just looked it up to check the date. In June, Trump's the super PAC that is the super PAC that is pro Trump and working against Tom Massey, okay, in the primary, released an ad. The ad is like pretty, it's pretty intense. But there was one point, and I had stopped it and made a screen grab of it because it was like it was a lot. But it says at one point there's a picture of the words on the screen are Massey voted no, House roll call vote, whatever. I don't have the audio of the thing, but I could tell you I think it's about probably some sort of trans issue because there's a picture of Massey looking wild-eyed, and next to him is imposed a picture of a fairly high-profile drag queen. So Massey, drag queen, Massey voted no is the picture in this. This is what
Right.
the ad, minute long ad is like. So Massey's a guy who's having his mug thrown up there with drag queen story hour because the Trump people, they take the gloves off. So I think that there's a lot going on here that is just, internal fighting, but people in office, Massey has ways to respond to that because he's in office, and he has to because his career is on the line. Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to build a new place for herself somehow in this political setting, and she has to fight her way forward in order to do that and dig in. And I feel like I'm watching a fight between office holders, and that's certainly not.
Right.
There's nothing in the Times story to make me think otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, what happened this week is that enough Democrats gave in to the Republican, the consistent Republican position on funding the government, that the government reopened under no understanding of political alliances or how power is expressed in Washington or anything like that. Did Trump lose the showdown fight, despite efforts to say, well, he may have won the battle, but he's lost. You will see he's lost the war because he poked the sleeping giant has awoken on the left, and they're mad, and they want Chuck Schumer's head, and they want his head, and they want everybody in 2026 to be some variant of Zoran Mamdani. Big trouble. But in fact, the political victory that was scored this week was scored by the Trump and the two Republican leaders in the House and the Senate, who said there's no reason to shut the government down, and you're not going to get anything out of it if you do so, Democrats. And they didn't, and the government reopened today or yesterday or whatever. And so if the political story of the week is Trump is losing it with the MAGA base, that's a weird angle on this week. I mean, you can say there are signs and portents that are bad for Republicans going into 2026, troubles with the economy. Trump, the Epstein story will be dogging him in some fashion, even if it doesn't develop much further, thus giving Democrats something to talk about on MSNBC or MS Now or MS Then or MS Tomorrow, whatever the hell it is, giving them, something juicy that they can keep, mining to keep up, salacious interest in Trump's personal foibles and, bad personal behavior. But politically, he's not losing anything. He backed Israel. Israel won the war. He did not want the government to be shut down. He gave nothing, and the Republicans gave nothing, and the government has reopened. The macro problems for Trump are macro problems. That's the economy, which is something that he'll get credit for if things go well, and he'll get blamed for if things go poorly. And there's almost nothing he can do about that. And the giant issue of whether or not the economy is being floated by this, whether AI is the future or is a bubble or is a combination of being the future, but is also a bubble. And that 2026 is going to see the economy take a severe downturn because of that.
But there is some, when he does try to wade into the macroeconomic issues, he falls pretty hard flat on his face. The 50-year mortgage idea, which people in his own administration are like, what? I mean, he'll just talk off the cuff about things that are on voters' minds, and then he sounds incompetent. Some of the idea, and then there is the tariff. Look, he has led to a rise in prices for many, many goods because of the tariffs. Consumers pay the price of the tariff, and his bet going in and what he promised voters when he had, the super April tariffs that tanked the stock market for a few days was, bear with us on the pain because long term it's going to bring back all these manufacturing jobs, this, that, and the other. So far, there is nothing he can point to that plausibly reassures voters that that's the case. And so instead we have gimmicks, and it's very much, again, the wheeler dealer gimmick guy comes up, defensive, but, tossing off 50-year mortgage ideas here and coffee tariff reductions there. And it's not enough. It's enough for a news cycle. It's not enough to actually reassure voters for an entire year before they go back to the polls.
Right. Well, I have never believed myself that Trump made hay on his approach to the economy either in 2016 or in 2020 or in 2024. Tariffs are not popular. They've never been popular in the United States. They've often been useful. I mean, people, they're imposed. Trump is not the first president to impose them. He imposed them in a pretty, you know, sort of spectacular and chaotic fashion. But he is our vengeance. He is our retribution. He is the payback for the political class having screwed the pooch with the financial meltdown and with Iraq and with the general management of Washington. And he has become our vengeance and retribution on the Democrats going so crazy on social issues, on the trans stuff being the most obvious version of it, but seeming to side with the protesters uh, since October 7th, which whether or not you support Israel or you don't support Israel, that's chaos on college campuses with rich entitled kids sitting in tents rather than going to class and that sort of thing. And that stuff that's his juice. That is what people like about him and think that he is their tribune for. It's that populism. It's social populism, the idea that the elites in this country are actively harmful to the good working order of the country and distracting everybody from what's important.
He's delivered on all those issues. I mean, he's went crazy cracking down on BDS, on trans, on the border, deportations, like these
Right.
the other problems that Christine is talking about, and you, as you said, John, these are macro problems. They're not MAGA problems.
Yeah. Right. So I'm just saying, I think it becomes weird to say because Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon are, exercised by the Jeffrey Epstein story, which, as I said earlier in the week, we're kind of all exercised by, even if you think that it's a weird old news thing and there's probably nothing in these papers. Like every time it comes up, you go, what on earth happened there? What is the story? And it's 20 years of this now, and I'm not satisfied with what I'm hearing and all that. But like assuming that, three, as Seth would say, like three disaffected members of the kind of Trump hagiography of 2016 and people who thought that he was some kind of, super political superhero with magical powers are now disappointed that he isn't, marching with them down to Comet Pizza to see what's in the basement of Comet Pizza because he wants to build a ballroom and help his children make billions of dollars in crypto. That's not that's not what's going to take him down. That's not what Lauren, the sort of the crazies in Congress and some podcast right wingers are not going to break Trump's connection to this 50 million people that are his base. That's not how it works.
But what could start to erode their confidence in his ability is the fact that, I mean, the crypto thing with his sons making a fortune off of it, the glitzy ballroom, the Gilded Age party, there is something to be said. I think it's too soon to make the critique that this shows he's out of touch. But his common touch, he doesn't get to be, he's not out there doing rallies as much. He's an executive now. He's in the White House. He's doing all the foreign policy trips. So he's hemmed in and not able to be out there among the people at WWF, shows and stuff in the way that he likes. He imports some of that to the White House. And that's, I think, why they redid the Rose Garden in that way. But he is going to need to make sure that he's cautious about that if the macroeconomic issues regarding the economy continue to cause average Americans to suffer more pain, because that is where he will start to look out of touch, in the same way that Joe Biden did when we were all looking at inflationary prices spiking and he was like, nothing to see here, it's fine.
All second term presidents look out of touch. Like that, there is no, if you call this his second term, all second term presidents, and remember, he's also somebody who has the ghost of having almost been shot and killed at an open air rally, like a year and 3 months ago. And if you think that doesn't factor into the way he conducts himself and lives his life, he did rallies throughout his first term. Every time he felt like he needed, like, basically to recharge his car battery, he would go to some place in
Right.
the
He
deep
can't do that
south
now.
and
Yeah.
have 50,000 people out there. And I don't think he wants to do that
Well, and he got
anymore.
booed at the last football game. Like, so
Right.
and he's also a second
Although
term
he
in the
went
sense
to a
that,
football game,
yeah.
if he'd gone to the Crimson Tide game, or something like that, he probably wouldn't have been booed.
No, but like he obviously misses that, and he's good at
right.
it, and so I think that must factor
Yeah.
into some of the it's going to factor into how people feel if the economy doesn't tick up a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean,
but these are general things, right? Like in other words, this is, as we said before, this is not really about, the kitchen table issues are not really about MAGA. They care about them because 300 million people care about them, and that's a normal thing to care about. But I feel like every time we try to zoom in on what could be the problem between Trump and his base, we end up with second term president with a sputtering economy, which is like, that's every president who is in that situation is going to be dealing with complaints and is going to lose their ability to change the narrative because they look like a lame duck and people are fighting over their, the succession and all that stuff. So I just don't know. Yeah.
But he also has an unusual number of incompetent people in his administration, and he's just appointed another one, this Ingracia person, to I guess General Services Administration, another job, because the first job he wanted in the Office of Special Counsel was taken away when they discovered his anti-Semitic text messages. So, and we can go cabinet official by cabinet official and point to the people who actually have not been doing their jobs very well. So there's a competence level that is in addition to the normal second term presidential woes, and a defensiveness about the incompetence that I think it does make this second term Trump administration distinct from previous presidents.
Well, the case to be made for what both Seth, what you and Christine are saying is second terms are bad, and they're particularly bad when the economy does not ballast them, right? So that's Obama, things weren't great, 2013, 2014. Bush, things really weren't great in 2005, 2006, and then we started into the financial meltdown in 2007, leading to the most, the catastrophic final year. The one case that you can say, you see, if the economy is strong, you can get away with anything, is Clinton's second term. Imagine a world in which Clinton had Hurricane Katrina or some version of that, or an inflationary spiral or something, and then
with the Iraq War, Katrina and the Iraq War were
But if you're Clinton and you get Monica Lewinsky at the beginning of 1998, the midterm season, and things aren't good otherwise, you do not survive. But Clinton had a booming economy. He had the government had gone into surplus with the payments on the deficit for the first time, like in 30 years, if there wasn't even that much government debt the last time there had been this kind of surplus. People were feeling good, and he survived something no one else would have survived, because his party stuck with him, in part because they had a story to tell. And the story was, let me work. Leave me alone. I'm doing a good job for you. These Republican maniacs are trying to distract me, and you can see when I'm paying attention, things go well, and so don't let them win. and
He
it
also had the
worked.
entire feminist establishment and his
Right.
wife
Yeah.
drag
Running block and
Monica
tackle.
Lewinsky
Right.
through the mud
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
defame her so that they could support him. So I just
Right.
think
But
that's an
you're right.
important.
There are 10,000 things that somebody else wouldn't have gotten away with. But Clinton wouldn't have, blocking tackles from his wife or not, Clinton would not have survived his second term without a booming economy. It's just that simple. The Democratic Party had nowhere better to turn. At the time, you thought, okay, well, so if he goes, like, there's Al Gore. It's not like Al Gore isn't going to be the kind of president that Democrats want and won't pursue mostly the same policies that Clinton would have pursued. But Clinton had this thing where his personal approval rating was in the toilet, but his work approval rating was in the 60s, and he survived it. So Trump, the thing about Trump is, if the for him he remains relevant or he remains powerful and potent, if he has that, America is running well, and all this other stuff is a distraction by lunatics who are so obsessed with their own stuff, like honor and presidential honesty and stuff like that really doesn't matter at all. And preserving abortions, as Nina Burley said, she also would have gotten on her knees for Bill Clinton, a New York sort of glossy magazine journalist, if she had to, because she needed to save abortions from the evil Christian right. So Trump's out of touchness won't matter if the economy is at 2.5% to 3%, or it'll matter, but it won't take him down. But in a world in which Nvidia blows up, the stock, or AI really does go through a long dark night of the soul in its valuations and all of that, and the thing that has been ballasting the larger American economy goes into receivership. All bets are off there. It's not that. And then Democrats, of course, will benefit. They'll come in 2026 into the House and maybe into the Senate, and they will impeach Trump on one thing or another, and then we'll go through 2027 with an impeachment, and the battle lines will be drawn, and it'll be the same kind of thing as it was before. But
We can all
except
listen
that
to the number one country music song in the nation right now, which is generated by AI. So it'll all be fine. It'll be fine.
that is
It's horrifying.
Well, I mean,
it's
and
number
to
one.
buttress, to support the point, like the economy, as important as the economy being, Clinton, John, as you were saying, I just checked the numbers that Clinton left office with the highest final presidential approval rating in recorded history. Like, it wasn't, he beat Eisenhower by 7 points. He
right.
beat Reagan he and Reagan were the only ones in the 60s, but Clinton was the highest of ever. So that's the difference the economy makes in a second term. That's literally, he was not, his bid to, make peace in the Middle East did not succeed, right? Right before he left office, he had, the Camp David thing collapsed. He had the Monica Lewinsky stuff. The thing that he had, the one thing was the economy, and it made him the most popular outgoing president of all time with just
And
the economy. And
in 2020, there was the internet boom bubble blew up. Like in March of 2020, that was when the sort of economy, Wall Street said, wait a minute, pets.com really isn't worth $1 billion valuation.
2000, not 2020.
I meant 2000. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. But Clinton ended up with a high approval rating because nobody really blamed him for that. Number one. Number two, they did muck about with approval ratings, right? So Clinton's approval rating was for him as a working president. So they always split his personal approval from his job approval, and that had not happened before. So when Reagan left office, he was admired both for his leadership and for his personal qualities. And Clinton was not admired by the American people for his personal qualities, but they created this secondary, this kind of job approval category, which was, as I say, was a novelty, and helped them navigate the world in which they could say, you see, the Republicans just aren't succeeding with this, with this attack on Clinton.
But regarding Trump, it's not just, John, that he's in trouble if this is an AI bubble that bursts. There is the issue of prices. And we know this is sticking because Trump has done something here that he doesn't usually do, which is he's following the Democrats on this. He after the recent elections, he picked up that affordability message right away. Now, I don't know what he's going to do with it other than gimmicks, as Christine says. But if that's all he's got on this, that could be a big problem.
Look, the thing about the tariffs is that, in unguarded moments, somebody in the administration will start praising the administration for their success with the tariffs because they've raised hundreds of billions of new dollars going into government coffers and thereby, shrinking the deficit. And then they drop it because, of course, what they're saying is that he's raised taxes hundreds of billions of dollars.
We've
Every
paid that.
dollar that is collected in that way is a dollar that has been collected from an American taxpayer.
And he might have to pay it back. He might have to pay those tariffs back if he if he loses in front of the Supreme Court the case that was just argued. The chaos. None of this stuff is sticking because he's testing the boundaries of executive power in doing it in the first place. And so he might get smacked down, just like Biden did with the student loan stuff.
Right. And but that's something to look forward to, is a wonderful, fruitless 2027 with an impeachment that will go nowhere, that will pass the House and will not get a 2/3 vote in the Senate, and that'll be fun because we just had such a great time during the first impeachment in 2019. Really, just a very special time for America. Though it's interesting because there will be a lot of different things to choose from on the menu of a Democratic Party in charge of the House. And some of them are not dismissible. I mean, the question of whether or not the Trump family is profiting personally from emoluments in the form of sovereign wealth funds of other countries personally investing in things that the Trump family is asking for. That's not, was the phone call good or bad with Zelensky?
Well, this will be the third time's a charm approach for the Democrats if they bring, this will be the third. He'll be the only president impeached a third time. So,
yeah, I mean, that's right. Well, he's the only president who was impeached the second time, by the way. Exactly. So he's like Aaron Judge now. Aaron Judge just won his third most valuable player award, and Trump will really be setting new records for a presidential.
Trump would call it a three-peat, but Phil Jackson would sue him,
would sue him. Well, the late Phil Jackson. That's right. Copyrighted the word three-peat. Was it Phil Jackson or was it Pat Riley? Wait,
it was Phil Jackson, I think.
Pat Riley. I think it was Pat Riley.
Oh, it was Pat Riley?
I think so.
Yeah. Tried to.
Sounds like the name of a Beanie Baby. It's not.
Three-peat?
No, three-peat.
Or three-peat or
yes,
Pat Riley.
Right.
Pat Riley looked a little like a Beanie Baby, actually, when you mention it. So we're shorter today than usual, but why not? We don't need to just blather on if we don't have anything much to talk about. So, Christine, you have a recommendation.
I do. I'm going to have for my fans, for the 5 people who like my weird fiction recommendations, I will have some weird fiction for you next week after I've taken a bunch of trips and have had more time to sit in airports and read. But I did. I've been dipping in and out of a recent book that I've really been enjoying, and I think some of our listeners might as well. It's called The Library of Lost Maps by James Cheshire. And it is this fascinating story of a cartographer, that's James, who finds the map room in University College London and just is mesmerized and transported and takes us with him on this journey through all these different kinds of maps. Maps that map the seabed floors, maps during wartime that try, the terrifying maps that the Nazis used to identify ethnic groups that they would be targeting, sort of magical maps trying to imagine what was off the edge of the world. I mean, he covers all of it. One thing I really loved about it, I guess this is a twofer recommendation, is that he begins the book with a quote by the wonderful Beryl Markham, who was a British aviator. She wrote a terrific memoir that came out in the 40s that our readers or listeners might also enjoy, called West with the Night. But he begins with her description of how valuable, important, and in a way magical that map making is, and how much trust humans place in each other when they draw maps, because she obviously was flying into these uncharted areas all the time, and she had to believe that piece of paper was honest, it was true, and it had good intention to get her from one point to the other. And she has he starts the book with her wonderful long discussion of maps. And he also, he talks about how our relationship with maps has changed over time, and our sense that they're just kind of this easy tool that's now embedded in our phone and can tell us where to go. And he really tries to restore a sense of awe and wonder about what a map really is, and just what an incredible task it is to map some of these places on Earth. So it's called The Library of Lost Maps by James Cheshire. It's also a beautifully made book with lots of reproductions of some of these incredible maps. So I highly recommend.
Good Christmas gift.
I think every human loves old maps, right? There is something about old maps that if you're in a store, or you see one of these like antique type map things, it's great. I mean, it makes you think of like the pirate maps, that you had as a kid and stuff like that. My kids
dragons
love maps, and they don't have maps as part of their life, kids today, but they love maps. They love printing out and making their own maps. They love the look of, if you can print out what looks like an old pirate map, just not like a parchment, it'll look like parchment, whatever. They love that stuff.
They would love
it's
this
almost
book,
like
Seth.
Ingrained.
They would love this book.
Well, look, the history of the 20th century is written in two images in some ways, which is the image of Europe in 1913, and then the image of Europe in 1922 after the division of the planet into all kinds of new formulas and countries and stuff after the Versailles Conference at the end of World War I. And you can see the next 80 years of chaos on the planet Earth, from the unbelievable hubris that was created by these world powers getting together and saying, now we'll just shove the Serbs and the Croats and into one country, and then we'll assign this, we'll put the
it's a whole chapter
into this and this.
He has a whole chapter that's called Manipulative Maps, which is, I think, probably one of the most powerful in the whole book. And it gets into that for that era, but also all around the world in different eras, how that map making led to geopolitical conflict for decades in various regions.
Can I add an interesting?
It's like a wedding seating map. You can't put the Croats next.
I have an interesting fact about old map makers. They would add what's called trap streets to their maps. These are small fictional streets that don't actually exist in the territory, in order to catch competitors infringing on their copyrights if they included that street.
Oh,
is that great?
That is so good.
Wait, but weren't people getting lost by following those maps?
A few.
No,
because that's like a metaphor for so many things. That's so great.
Yeah, that's like my single favorite book detail. One of my great sort of anecdotes of famous people in relation to each other is that William F. Buckley Jr. Wrote a book and sent it to Norman Mailer. And the one thing that he did in this book is that in the index next to Norman Mailer's name, he wrote the word "hi," because he knew that the first thing that Mailer would do is turn to the index and see if he was mentioned in the book. So that's sort of like the traps. I know what you're doing, as we say to our small children.
That's an ego trap street right there.
Exactly. Oh, there you go. Ego trap street. That's perfect. Okay, so the name of the book again by James Cheshire is?
The Library of Lost Maps.
Okay, fantastic recommendation. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back on Monday. For Abe, Seth, and Christine, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.